If you are looking for something that is pollinator friendly, easy to grow, hard to kill, then we just got to talk about African Blue Basil. It's really hard to catch on camera, but hopefully you can see here the number of pollinators, look at that beauty, that are just hanging out on this African Blue Basil. They absolutely love it. I mean, I can't come out here and not find someone, usually dozens of someones, enjoying themselves. Now here is the funny thing about this plant right here. About 18 months ago, I was hanging out in one of our local nurseries and I spotted this plant that I didn't recognize, and they told me it was a basil. I tasted it and I thought it was a terrible tasting basil. I don't really like that super strong scent, but what I noticed is that the pollinators, even though we were in a greenhouse, were all over it. So I laid down my $8 and I brought that puppy home. Well, plant home. I guess it's really not a puppy. After a couple of months, I transplanted that 1 gallon pot into this wooden container. I'd say this is probably a 10-gallon container. And you can see just how big she has grown. She made it through the winter with a little protection. She doesn't get watered all the time, but she still continues to grow. And she was a little out of control growing off to the side. So I started taking cuttings. And like with most basil, it's pretty easy. You just want to find a place that you can cut off above a separation of leaves. Cut it off. I could have used a tool, right? And then I just strip all the leaves. I leave just a couple of leaves. I'll often just take the flowers off. And I just take that. Sometimes I throw them in water like this. This one could be ready for transplanting soon. I got lots and lots of roots. And then sometimes I'll just take my cuttings and put them down into some seedling trays, like so. Water them in really, really well. Wait a few weeks, and then you end up with something that looks like this. In fact, I had a little thicker pieces here, but it was still pretty short. I put them in here and I set them in another garden bed. It's amazing how well the roots just grew right out. And it'll still be very easy to take right out of this tray and plop them around the garden. And plopping around the garden is what I did. In fact, I've actually been documenting the journey of a couple of these, and you just gotta take a look at this. In May, I took my first little propagation and put it in this birdie's bed. And then it looked like this a couple of weeks later. And as time went on, it just kind of kept on growing. And then a few weeks ago, I was traveling and no one was taking care of the garden bed. It wasn't even getting watered. And I came back home and it looked like this. It is completely out of control. It is what I would call crazy good. Let's get in close and take a look at how many more pollinators are on this bed as well. I don't even think the camera could keep up with it, but easily right now there's 4, there's 8, there's a dozen, there's probably 2 dozen pollinators just on this one plant. And to show you how tall it is, this is a birdie's large tall bed here, and look at how tall it is now. It is easily 2.5 feet up from the top of the bed, but I think part of the reason that this has been so successful, I think it's the height of these beds. One of the reasons I love these beds, and if you guys have been on the channel, you know I talk about this, it's easy for me to garden waist high, but that also means that the bed can hang on to a lot of moisture. So while it hasn't had a lot of water lately, we did have a whole bunch of rain in June and July. And with that, I think the bed was able to absorb a lot of that moisture and really help with the growth, because other things growing in this bed are doing well too. In fact, we have some marigolds back here that have sort of taken over. And now might be a really good time to mention that for Labor Day through September 9th, Epic Gardening is having an epic Labor Day sale. The garden beds are up to 30% off, and with my code MEADOW, MEADOW, you can take an additional 5% off your order, including the things that are already on sale. So that's like an extra bonus. I'll be sure to include the link right here. And if you're in a place where you're winding up your garden season, now would be a great time to get those garden beds, get them ready, and start planning for your spring garden, whether you need to plan for your soil, what you're going to fill the garden beds with, and all of those things. Just because it's September doesn't mean we stop dreaming about the garden. Now, maybe you don't live in the South, and so this may not be a perennial for you, but I bet if you could keep a cutting or two inside the house throughout the winter, you'd still be able to have more African blue basil later. One of the other questions comes up is it edible? And I was told originally that it wasn't really edible, but I did some more research, and what I found out is that it is actually an edible plant. But raw, it's a really strong flavor. You got a very strong licorice, very strong anise kind of a flavor to it. So I don't like it raw. But my understanding is when you break it down and you use it in pesto or in cooking, that flavor really softens. And so I look forward to testing that out and trying it and see what it tastes like. Meantime, she's gonna need a haircut pretty soon, I think. And this isn't the only one. Check out this other garden bed over here. I've got African blue basil growing in this bed, also taking over. Once I start adding more plants, I'm obviously gonna have to cut that back. Before I left for my travels, I even threw a couple of pieces in here. You can see how big this has gotten. There's one over there too, here in the pumpkin patch. We're hoping to grow some Seminole pumpkins. The bugs and critters kind of got a hold of it at first, but we're holding out hope. Maybe we'll get a few pumpkins this year. By the way, this is one of my original Birdie's beds that I got. And so it's been out in the garden, 2.5 years, almost 3 years now. Still looking great. So again, if you are looking for something that is great for the pollinators, easy to grow, hard to kill, and you get the bonus of being able to eat it, then my friends, African blue basil is something you should be looking out for in your local nursery. And here's a little fun fact. It is a sterile plant. So even though you see it growing all over, that's because I've planted it there. That's because it's just growing. It's not dropping seed and making new plants. In fact, the one we looked at in the first garden bed started out with 3 little cuttings that I had rooted. That is all. So I'll tell you, my friends, it cannot be beat for all the things you want out of a plant. If you have any questions about the African blue basil, please put them in the comments below. I'll share everything I'm learning about it. And if you want to see more of what's growing on in the garden, be sure to check out this video right over here. Until next time, my friends, remember to drink plenty of water, wear that high quality sunscreen, and as always, have a fantastic day.